Hello, YouTube. It's not morning as usual, but I've still got my cup of coffee. No bad days. Today's a good day because we're up to episode number 47 of my Chit Chats with Git Cats, and this is a good one. This has been a lot of fun catching up with a lot of my guitar heroes that I learnt to play the guitar, basically listen to their records, and Ding Dong, who's at my door today, but none other than Mr. Mark Lizotte, also known as Diesel. Hey, Mark, how are you, buddy?
Oh, hi, Rick. Thanks for having me.
No problem, mate. Thank you for taking the time. And thanks for sitting through and troubleshooting with me as Skype gave us a bit of grief at the start.
I'm sorry. I threw the spanner in.
Mate, these things happen, but you know what? We're here a couple of minutes late, but it's rock and roll, isn't it?
We went to default equipment. I was trying to be fancy.
Yeah. One of these days soon, apparently the software that I use is going to include their own track client, which will make things a lot easier. Mark, I'm going to jump straight in, man.
Yeah, man.
I want to know what started the love affair with the guitar for you, mate. How did you start playing?
The love affair started, almost from out of the womb, or probably still in the womb. I think just the sound of the guitar, it was really attractive to me, and I didn't quite know how to voice use my voice to sort of say I want a guitar as strong as I probably could have, and that's kind of, I think that's probably intrinsically why I play so many things now. Because I mean, although I'm, people go, oh, guitar player, and they're quick to point that out. It's not like I don't have an absolute love for the guitar, but my love is not exclusive just for the guitar. I do love the sound of it, but I love playing a lot of other things too. So, I think it was a kind of combination of being getting into my teens, and the fact that my brother and sister bought me an electric guitar for Christmas. That kind of sort of all came together. Up until then, I was playing cello.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. And that was an accident, really, because I was living in Arizona, and it just so happened that the school that I was going to had a string program, which was pretty unusual for a public school to have a string program. It was, not the norm.
Yep.
Usually it's just a couple of brass instruments, and that's about it if you're lucky.
Uh-huh.
And my sister was at Victorian College of the Arts, the VCA, and she was sharing sharing a room with a cellist. And so she sent me these recordings of her roomie playing cello, and just to pique my interest. And so it was one of those, this is uncanny. She sends this recording. I'm at the school. I've just started at this new school, and there's a cello. So it was kind of like, well, that's what you're going to do.
Cool.
And that was, that really kept me entertained, I suppose, for, a good 6-7 years. And then it was like one of those things of like, well, how am I going to integrate? How am I going to get in a band with this? It wasn't really. I was with a youth orchestra on the weekends, a Western Australian youth orchestra, but around that age of 13, 14, I started getting the Sunday paper and looking in the warning ads. I got the Sunday paper on a Saturday night. I was that keen.
Yeah.
I'd go up to the deli and get the first pressing, start calling people, and it was a waste of time. Everybody was out, Sometimes you get their mums and dads and be like, no, he or she's not home right now. Call back tomorrow, you pain in the bum, And so, I just started meeting people through the paper, and you start this kind of courting, I suppose, in a sense, but they'd say that what they saw was a 14-year-old at that point, guitar player who was full of as the Jewish people say, chutzpah. I had plenty of that, but an actual technique or knowledge of the instrument, not much at all. But because I've been playing cello, my fingers were all really muscled up.
Cool, cool.
And that's the reason why I use my pinky a lot more than most guitar players. If you notice, there's a lot of 3-finger guitar players in the world. And that's not it doesn't mean diddly squat, actually. Django Reinhardt did things that people still can't play
with two.
With pretty much two.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it is nice to have a strong pinky finger for sort of doing spreads and chords and bends and stuff. You know, it feels good to me.
Yep.
Yeah, so I started sort of making friends with a few camps, and then eventually got taken in by one particular group of people, and they were all like 10, 15 years older than me. But they, thought, well, this is kind of like a development sort of thing. We'll take him and see what happens. And yeah, it was pretty soon that I realized. I think there was one particular occasion where the singer and sort of pointed out that I was on the wrong pickup of the guitar, right in the middle of the song. It'd be like, and just came over and went click to the back pickup. And I guess I was kind of into the neck pickup at that time because it was more mellow and I felt like I could hide amongst it a bit better. It was like, I don't really know what I'm doing, so I'll just play on the neck pickup and sort of, muffle it and sort of safe, and he was like to the back pickup and it's like, suddenly
here I am.
Suddenly like the floodlight came on me. And I just remember having this like feeling like going from my head down to my toes of just like, oh God, overwhelming sort of embarrassment of just like, oh man, I really don't know what I'm doing with this good thing, And it's like that when you first, like I didn't even have an acoustic guitar to start on, really. I mean, besides the guy across the road when we lived in Inaloo, and he was much older than me, and he had this crappy nylon string guitar, and I used to sort of go over and steal it off him, and he'd come back and get it back off me. And so I had my cello, and then my brother left a bass. That was like the stepping stone. He left a nice Fender P bass and a Vox amp, a Vox AC50, and went overseas. So that was like, wow, things are getting way better here. But then I still didn't have the guitar. So finally I had the guitar, I had an amp, and that was it. I was like, I'm ready. I want to join a band, But yeah, I still had a lot to learn about just the workings of how to pull sounds. And just it's from going from cello to an electric guitar is quite a transition.
Yeah, absolutely.
So and a lot of being a guitar player, an electric guitar player, let's just say, it's it's a power tool kind of thing. Like you got to know how to use it. Otherwise, you're just gonna cut the legs off the table without meaning to. It can be loud. It can be out of tune terribly. It's half of being a good guitar player is just wrangling. That's why I say to people when they're starting out, it's like, look, half of playing guitar is being a wrangler. You got to wrangle that damn thing into tune constantly. It's like tuning it by the tuner is like, okay, but it doesn't finish there. It never does. I mean, I'm tuning practically all the time I'm playing. Like even if it's just pulling it a little bit like this, it's come on, or give it a bit of a push here. The last resort is to use the tuning pegs for me. Like I have to do that sometimes on stage, but sometimes I can just will it to kind of be more in tune just by like yanking a little bit or pushing a little bit, or even just playing it a certain way. It's that subtle.
I hear you on that one.
Yeah, and so in guitars are just they're the cranky little things. I mean, there's ones that you get to a point where they really behave themselves nicely, and that's great and everything, but you still got to just kind of nurture them constantly. That's part of your job. It's not like it just comes out of the box and you turn it on and it's ready to go. So there's a lot of that and a lot of frustration when I first started. Just kind of trying to understand it all, and that's where like mentors and someone like that just really wants to show you how everything works, can make such a big, can really make you go leaps and bounds. I guess YouTube is a great thing now for that sort of thing. It's like, why is my guitar staying in tune? I don't know. Let me look it up and see what problematic areas are. But I find just hanging at that point, I had some older mentors that were just, been already around the block. And so they show me things and, just like killing time on Saturday afternoons, like what we're doing right now. Those hours are priceless. I learned so much from from a few people back then, and it still resonates now, and I pass it on to other people.
Cool. So what was your first guitar? Your first electric guitar?
It was an Anson, which is ANSON. It's very kind of obscure, the brand that came out of Korea, I think, and a few of them landed in Western Australia, probably a few other parts of the country, but not a huge shipment. And it was a Melody Maker copy, so it was like a Gibson Melody Maker Sunburst, two single coil pickups, 4 knobs, so it was Gibson style. And it was pretty kick-ass until I started experimenting with heavier strings. I liked the sound of heavier strings straight away. I've got some set, and it was like a jazz set. I was like, damn, that sounds so much better. And then the machine heads just started dying, and one of the covers came off, and then I saw that the cog that connects to the machine post, was made of plastic. It wasn't even brass.
Oh, yeah, right.
Never going to handle like a heavier string, like 9s to 42, probably like what you wanted to have on that guitar. And I was like, oh, plastic. I guess that's where you cut corners on costs.
And was this all being played through your brother's AC50?
Yeah. He had it was a 1960. I'd guess it was a late 60s, judging by it was a JMI period one. It had silver bulldog sort of speakers, like the blue bulldogs, but they were silver, with that same sort of shape and basket and everything, and it had a horn. So it was, I think the speaker box was made for like anything, maybe a vocal or a keyboard or something. I disconnected the horn because someone told me it was like, get rid of that thing. I was like, okay, snipped it off. I just wore that thing wore it right out to the point where the speakers, I had to put like tape on them to kind of hold them together. They were like falling to bits. And then I eventually, replaced the speakers. The amp got worked on so many times by different repairers, and unfortunately quite a few repair jobs were done badly. And so it started sounding like something that I didn't like, number one, and nothing like what it should sound like. It really drifted off. It probably just needed a really good going over, or maybe a new transformer or something. I don't know, but I gave up on it anyway, and ended up swapping it for JMP 50 watt JMP Marshall.
Nice. Which
was a bit of a it's a strange kind of I mean, I love that amp, but compared to the bottom that the AC50 had, the box had a lot more sort of like bottoms to it, and just it was a bigger, deeper sound, and the Marshall was suddenly like really pokey. But then that was another education for me. It was like, oh, now I know what mids are. Marshall just had these mids that were like singing, like really singing mids, and just that crunch, that 2 to 3K crunch that is a Marshall to me. That like you can say that a Marshall's based off of a Fender, but that might have been at the very, very, very beginning. But the way they drifted by then, they definitely had that distinct Marshall sound that to me is like very much their own. There's nothing else that sounds like that to me.
So when you started playing with bands at that age, self-taught then, huh?
Yeah, I mean, look, I had a few lessons off this beautiful jazz player that was playing around Perth at the time that my dad hooked up. His name was Lenny Parker, and he was a real George Benson devotee. He had the George Benson Ibanez guitar, which I think I was like 12 or 13 when I got a few lessons off him, and it was like, whoa, he's got the George Benson guitar.
Cool.
It was just like, wow. And he had beautiful, beautiful licks and had all the runs and the chords. And so he showed me a few things, little things that you just never sort of forget, like standards like Blue Dolphin Street and things like that. And, a few chords that are just, it's like doing Twister to like play them, But I was like, yeah, that's cool. I like jazz and everything, but I want to rock. That wasn't never going to just take all of my kind of focus, And I mean, my dad would have loved me to just play jazz, I'm sure, but because he was a jazz player himself, a sax saxophonist. So he'd take me down to the Perth Jazz Society on Monday nights. Before I even had a guitar, he'd make me get up and push me up there and play bass, sit in with people. It was just one of those kind of things to appease my dad to a certain degree, but to have absolutely no regrets, because the best thing for any guitar player is just to kind of sponge off of every type of genre. Really kind of that's what's going to make you. Even if you end up just playing one type of music, if you don't sort of like touch other genres, it's going to be very limiting, I think.
Yeah, mate. How old were you? How old were you when the first Johnny Diesel and the Injectors record came out?
Well, I was probably like 20, 21 when we recorded it. I think it came out when I was 22. So,
because man, you're just so well-rounded as a player by then. Like,
I mean, yes, I mean that was a vehicle for that sort of type of playing that really suited that band. But yeah, I guess by the solo record that came after that, a lot of other things that were like inside of me were like wanted to come out, showed themselves on the first solo record. But look, the first record is definitely, I was like, these are the elements I got to work with, and I'm gonna make this type of music for that.
Yep.
And yeah, it was really catering for that sound of that band. Yep. I didn't have an idea for a second album. It wasn't it wasn't really a plan. In fact, that was, I guess, the thing that was kind of a hard thing to get my head around, was before I realized, this is the problem. I need to be a solo artist, that's simple as that. And this is not gonna, then suddenly not making another album with this band suddenly makes sense. It was really a one-off thing, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. But I guess for people around are like, why? What happened? And it's like, well, that's how. And I've if you look at my career, it's been a series of those type of things. The blues record I made with Chris Wilson, for instance, which happened 6-7 years after that. That was a specialty one-off thing. And so the first album I made with the Injectors was pretty much that as well. But I guess when you start out, you make an album, it's a massive thing. Well, let's just say the biggest debut by an Australian artist at that point of all time. The highest selling record of that year. People just expect it just to keep rolling, and it was like, no, sorry, I'm moving on to something else now. Like, what? Thankfully, my management at the time, and just the people who were in my inner circle were just like totally. I mean, I'm sure there was moments of kind of like, whoa, what's going on? But then they were like, no, yep, okay, let's see, what are we doing? It was kind of just keep moving forward. And once you've got a few songs, the cornerstones or whatever, it was pretty obvious. It was like, this is a different record. This is a different artist. This is an artist embarking on it the rest of his career. Why like bog him down with like that one thing? It's silly. So, for people that still come up and go, oh, what happened? It's like, look, it just happened, and then it just didn't happen. So get over it. That's all I can say. But I'm very chuffed that they still have a space in their hearts for that record. Of course I won't begrudge them for that, but you just have to accept that not all bands stay together for 40 years or something like Rolling Stones. You know what I mean?
So what were you listening to in the early days, man?
I think, for that first record, I mean, back then I was listening to a lot of my dad's blues stuff in his record collection. Jazz and blues, goes without saying. I really loved a lot of the Australian bands that were kind of just like taking that blues and making it. I mean, AC/DC, Rose Tattoo. These were bands that I saw playing in pubs that had a huge impact on me. Rob Riley, what an eloquent, beautiful guitar player, and just a great pair of like hands that just make such good sound, and a great singer too. I just wanted to kind of be sort of bones and all, and and not I'm really glad if there's anything that it's kind of like, whoa, that's pretty go. That's really produced.
Mark, the Skype is kind of just jittering a bit at the moment, mate. Not sure if it's good on your end. But have I turned into max headroom on your end? Because it seems to have stalled.
It's a little frozen.
Yeah, I've got a bit of a freeze. I tell you what, mate. What I usually do is Skype out and Skype back in again. I'm going to try that and try and get you back in, and that usually works. So give us a second there, folks. Sometimes that can fix it. Can you still hear me, Mark? I'm going to try and Skype out and Skype you back into you, mate. And that's why you guys tune in for the live, because it's people are here for the train wreck. This isn't a train wreck. This is... Okay. How about now, Mark? Can you... Is that any better? Okay. I'm not...
Pretty good.
It's good for you. You're not looking so good on my end, but you know what? I can hear you a lot better, so that's okay. Mate, I'm just going to bring up something. I keep coming back to that first record, and I'm going to move on from that. It's just I like to get into the early days of how people get to where they are. I was sitting around at a friend's place a couple of years ago, and I always thought, for me, a big influence on my rhythm playing was Malcolm Young. And I always thought, I'm just trying to play like Malcolm or like Keith. You're coming good now. That's good. And I was at a mate's place. We may have smoked a little bit of the whoopee weed. It had been a while, and I was sitting there, and he put on the first record of yours. And I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking to myself, fuck me, if I didn't know better, I'd swear that's me playing guitar right now. And thinking, okay, no, that's just the weed sort of playing with me. And then my friend turns to me and says exactly what I was thinking. He goes, dude, if I didn't know better, I'd swear that's you playing right now. So that just shows how much that first record rubbed off on me as a guitar player. Yeah. Moving on from that, though, I caught a couple of songs off Hep Fidelity in a shopping centre. I was off playing a gig somewhere in like Mount Isa or something like that, and a song came on. Yeah, a song came on the radio in like Woolies or something of yours, and it's happened to me a couple of times around in local places, and the guitar sounds just jumped out as being so fucking good, man.
Well, it's the Woolly speakers, you know.
But no, compared to other stuff that was playing on there at the time, it just jumped out as sounding so good. So you've obviously always had an ear for tone.
Yeah, look, I think I've had some really good help back like early on, but I guess I do have an ear for you know. I think if you've got an ear for music, you've got an ear for tone. So
yeah,
I mean, it's just, you know, if you just let it tell you what it wants, it usually does, you know. Like you plug a guitar in, and it's like, okay, you know, and you just tweak to taste, you know. You just find, it has to be something absolutely like diabolically just wrong to not be able to get a tone out of it. So I've used all kinds of things, you know. When I say all kinds of things, I really mean all kinds of things. I've plugged straight into a Neve console, no amp, just straight into the desk itself. Used that as a sound. I've used little amps like this. I've taken a little amp like that, cut the grill off it, so the little 8-inch speakers exposed, poured uncooked. That was always a joke would say. Someone would say, was it cooked or uncooked? You idiot. Uncooked rice, okay? So raw rice, put the rice on the speaker, and that dances around and creates like a fuzz kind of sound. Mic that up. Yeah. There's like, when it comes to like wanting for a certain thing, you know, I'm not married to like, it has to have valves, it has to be this, blah, 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 blah. It's just like, you know, I think after my sound guy, Warwick, told me in a car recently that one of the Jeff Beck albums is a pig nose. It just kind of It's like, of course it is. It's Jeff Beck, you know?
Yeah.
And then you can hear it. Once he told me, I was like, oh my God, it is a pig nose. Through beautiful mic pre's and some nice reverb and stuff, you know, compression. You could, yeah, of course. And then it's just the hands do the rest. But yeah, I think tone is something that, again, the song usually dictates, you know, what the tone should be. But having said that, that Hope Fidelity record, I pretty much exclusively almost used like the same amp all the way through, which was a reissue Bassman that Fender were doing at the time.
Cool.
And we just pull out the rectifier straight out of the music shop, just get out, put a solid state rectifier in, sort of tighten it up a bit, and then yeah, it was like just that and a wrap pedal that I could pretty much do everything with that. And then my favorite trick back then was to slam like two DBX compressors, 160Xs, like one into the other. So you get one for the real fast attack and then one that sort of like gives you the sustain that kind of comes back really slow. So all those big blooming chords that you hear on that record are like, it's going, and as the chord's supposed to get quieter, it gets louder.
Yep.
So that idea of playing something where you hit a chord and it's like you have the attack and then instead of it just dissipating and dying, it sort of comes up. Then you hit the next chord. I mean, that's just addictive for any guitar player. You set that up on any guitar player and they'll just have a grin from ear to ear. When you get that in time, you know, the next element is getting that rise and the release and the attack in time with the track, then you're really on fire. And that's what we did a lot on that record. Just, okay, feeling good? Yeah, okay, let's do it. And a lot of, for me, still to this day, recording is a lot about getting the sound inspiring. And then, you know, it's like, of course you have to have, number one, a song. You got to have, an idea of the part you're playing, or at least a fair idea. But yeah, if you've got the sound all happening, it's going to just happen, you know. You set the stage, you know, then you put the all quality onto the stage, all really good players, actors, whatever, then go, right, action, and just, it happens, you know.
Yep.
If that's part of recording. It's like setting up the scene. And sounds are definitely that. Like when I've worked with other artists and then, you know, it's like, have you played much electric guitar? I'll say, you know, if they're acoustic guitar player, and especially with like singer-songwriters, and they're like, no, you know, not a lot of them. I go, well, look, just let me set up a sound for you. You just play. Because I think a lot of people that don't play electric guitar, but play acoustic like almost exclusively. But the thing with electric that alienates them is, you know, it's like, oh, it's technical, you know. So if I set a sound up for them and get it all sounding really like inspiring, then just give it to them and then they'll play it. It's suddenly they're like, wow, I can do this, you know. It's instant gratification. And, you know, when you're trying to get somewhere in the studio, you kind of need that to kind of speed things along. So, yeah, that next album I really explored more with stuff. Like was with the first album we tracked as a band all together. I put a few overdubs on, but there was very minimal overdubs on it. And that was a fun way to do it. And I think, you know, for that scenario with those guys, with all of us, I should say, we were a little bit, except for our drummer who had done a few sessions, but the rest of us were all pretty green with recording. So I was like, how's this going to work? And, you know, I was talking about this the other day, how before we got to actually go into the studio, well, we were shown the studio. We're like, here it is, boys. This is where you're going to make the record. And it was
where was that?
You know, it's legendary studio in Memphis called Ardent. Really beautiful studio.
Nice.
Kind of like the Abbey Road of Memphis.
Okay. And who did it?
So Terry Manning.
Thought so.
So Terry's done everything from the Stax label stuff, but with like Al Green and Booker T and everything, to, you know, of course, ZZ Top.
Yeah.
And everything in between, Fabulous Thunderbirds. And he knew just to kind of like let us do our thing. But before we actually went into the studio, so we got a tour of the studio, and it was like, now we're going to go out to this garage on the outskirts of Memphis. And it was literally someone's garage in their house, and it had been sprayed with this foam shit that just went all over the ceiling and all over the walls. So you went in there, and it was just it was like being in deep space. There was absolutely no ambience.
Yeah.
And if you think ambience is important, like, it is. Like with music, it's basically like it's you know, it just puts clothes on it and makes it attractive. you know, the sound that is.
Yep.
Suddenly you are freaking naked, more naked than you could ever imagine, and everything just sounds like turd. And so we were like playing the songs, and we're like, oh, you know, everything hurt. I was playing through. Now I'm just gonna like rat on it, but like I love Seymour Duncan stuff, like some of the things that they've done, some of the pickups and everything. But this amp that was around back then called the convertible amp, just awful. Okay. Yeah. For me anyway, it might have been good for just like playing little tiny club gigs with, you know, in the corner or whatever, but just did not like me, didn't like my velocity or whatever. Yeah. And it was just going, it was just carrying on, vomiting everything. And it just suddenly, I just hated every song. I hated myself. I hated my sound. I just hated everything. But he knew what he was doing, because it was like, you guys, I'm going to make this, everything you do is going to suck, you know? Then we're going to go backwards from there, or forwards or whatever. And ripped apart the songs, changed the arrangements. Not I wouldn't say like radically, but enough to kind of make them, because we've been playing them live, you know, and live is one thing and recordings are completely different. Whatever's exciting live generally is boring as batshit in the studio or as a record. Yeah. And we needed to learn that. And that's something that I've passed on to a lot of artists since then. It's just, you know, like, okay, well, that might fly on stage in the moment of a live realm, but when you've got just two speakers to work with, and that's your realm now, left and right. Yep. And these days it's a freaking Bluetooth speaker that doesn't even have left and right. But you've got to make that canvas like explode. So what if it's extraneous long bits that just are boring on record? Get rid of them. You know, make it a record. You know, You've got to make it exciting. Uh-huh. And he was teaching us that in 10 days in that garage. And so when we got back in the studio, we had all these different arrangements of the songs. And we were allowed to like just be able to put headphones on and hear like, oh God, that sounds good. Yeah. Oh, you know, it was just like we were given a sugar cubes and carrots, you know, put in the pen, you know, here's your sugar cubes and carrots now. And it was actually, the boot camp was, I think, the most important thing of the record.
Really?
So yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
I mean, if we would have gone in there, we would have just acted like idiots and gone, we know what we're doing, and we didn't, you know.
Yep. I've had a few guests that have had Terry produce albums for them. Both cool. Bob Spencer and Rick Brewster, Spring and Wind.
That's right. They took the same. They followed our path actually. Not that far afterwards, I think. So probably within the next 18 months, they were over in Memphis.
And they both said that Terry recorded their guitars through 8-inch speakers. Did he do anything like that with you?
We did. We didn't get into too much of that on the first record, but when I started half of my next solo record, we were experimenting with just all kinds of things. I think my head really expanded to that idea when it was actually not even our session. It was, I can't remember why. I think we arrived a little early the second time, and we're just like hanging, and he said, "Oh, come by this other studio on Beale Street." I can't remember the name of it, but it was where ZZ Top had set up, and they weren't there, but he just said, "Come in and have a look," and blah, blah. And he showed me, he said, "This is what Billy's using." And I'm like, what? And it was this little transistor Marshall thing. Yeah. Again, no valves, no quad box, you know, nothing like that looks like, oh, that's going to be a big guitar sound. Big, I have to say, big and small that don't have any, that just don't relate to being in the studio. Like a studio is a place where you can break rules, and the biggest guitar sounds have come from the smallest things. And I learned that actually, if I didn't learn the lesson completely, but I just remember like years before that when we were doing some demos, and I brought every piece of gear that I had and I borrowed some, and I made this big wall, you know, and I said, I want a big guitar sound, and, you know, mic it up. And of course most mics just can't even handle that sort of level. They just crap themselves. The room starts compressing, so you end up getting smaller. Yeah. And then you listen to it out, you know, after, which sounds big while you're doing it because you've got so much sound going on and it's bleeding through the walls, and you're like, oh yeah, that's fun. Then you listen to it like at a low level through the speakers and actually listen to what you've actually recorded, and it's like, ew, this sounds awful. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, look at all those Led Zeppelin records, Little Supro, you know.
Absolutely.
And yeah. So yeah, it's just It's a funny thing, and that's it's not like, yeah, sure, I can get a quad box and a 100-watt head to like work in the studio. I'm pretty sure I have many times, but most of the time, yeah, what I've recorded is like just one speaker is always a lot easier.
Yep.
And yeah, like 20, 30, 40 watt amp at the most. It's like those type of like levels of sound just don't really make it a rat's ass in the studio.
Yeah.
It's creating the illusion, especially if you want to stack a few guitar sounds, different parts, different sounds. Like the more like real estate you take up with just like those kind of muscular guitar sounds, the less you're going to be able to, put on later.
Absolutely. Now, mate, lately I keep telling my friends that I've really been wanting to get myself a Strat with a Floyd Rose on it. And it wasn't until this morning when I whacked on a film clip or two of the old Injectors, and I looked at it and went, oh, maybe that's where that inner desire for me to have a guitar like that comes from.
Well, there you go.
So I noticed your newer Fender signature model is very much like that black Strat that you were using back then, but without the Floyd Rose. Have you grown out of using that? Did you feel it affected the sound?
I think I could easily use one again, but it's just I don't know if I would want to have to deal with the blocks and the clamping down and all that rubbish, because I can pretty much flog a standard tremolo, like really give it a lot of just really put the hurt on it. And when I say it seems to stay in tune, it does stay in tune. I've got it to a point where I know which little bits to work on, and it takes a bit of, again, wrangling and maintenance and stuff, but no, it works perfectly. And that's amazing that Leo Fender, did that. But having said that, the Floyd actually has a sound, and I don't mind that sound at all. I actually quite like it. It's real pingy. It's got this real ping, and the feel of the spring and just the feel of the way the tremolo reacts is, again, different too, because it's locked off. It's a little shorter scale, so it's a little bit more reactive. So a little bit of movement does a lot, and it's quite expressive, and I like that a lot. So I've been thinking about maybe getting one guitar and putting a Floyd on it again, just for those characteristics. Yeah. But that's why me and the Floyds just kind of finished, I guess, around the mid-90s, because I was just sick of like all the spare parts all breaking all the time. And because of the gauge of string that I used, it really, those blocks never liked my strings. Never, ever. No.
So what gauge are you using?
I've been using the same gauge for almost ever now, which is 12, 16, 20, 32, 44, 56. Yeah, so it's 12 to 56. Which is like usually for like people that tune down to C or B, but I'm in standard tuning, so it feels chunky, but because I've got big high frets, you can sort of get underneath, and it feels quite it's playable in a nice way. But you have to like kind of have intention. It's not a 9 where it just you have to kind of
cello hands.
It's good. I just look at it as an extension of bashing an acoustic, because when I'm playing an acoustic, that's kind of what it feels like. And when I get an electric, I don't want it to suddenly feel spindly. I want it to feel still like a guitar that I can dig into. And bending, well, you know what? Just do it. And action is another thing. If you want your guitar to sound better, like probably put the action up a bit so it's not buzzing out all over the place. That's a pretty simple equation.
Yeah. So do you find yourself playing?
There's a whole group out there that think that the lower the action, it's like, it's not a car, dude. It's not a Ferrari. It's a musical instrument, and that string needs to breathe. It needs to actually go boing, boing, like that, and not hit shit. Do you understand? No, like low is not like, oh, look how low it is. No, it's like,
it's a fine line. It's a fine line.
Listen to how shit it sounds.
Yeah, exactly. So you said about playing acoustic and the heavier strings. I've known you later on in your career to be playing mostly acoustic shows, yeah?
Well, I mean, you say mostly acoustic. There's a bunch of acoustics in the rack when I do these shows, but it's more and more now, like almost half electric, half acoustic. Because when I started doing the solo acoustic thing, I was like, hang on, why does it have to be acoustic? I mean, I'm like, no one had an answer to that. So I was like, I'm bringing an electric, and just started sneaking more and more electrics into the show. And it's like, this is more fun now. I mean, it's not like I don't like playing acoustic. That's a lot of fun for me. I've made it, so I've got things to like have fun with, but different tunings. And yeah, the Mini has been great for that, the Mini Maiden, because it's allowed me to have so many of them with me all the time because they're so small. I can fit like 4 of them in a bag. One's a drop D, one's a baritone, which is completely like off the planet because it's a short scale and it shouldn't even work, but I've found the right gauges. So I've got a baritone, which is down to B. I've got a drop D. I've got a standard. That's just all the 12s. And sometimes I have a Mando 12, which is tuned right up high. So it's like octave strings, but then some octaves even above that. So it's almost like a mandolin. And that's really sweet and chirpy. And then I have the standard 6, of course. So that covers a lot of ground. And yeah, having a Strat and a Falcon and the Gretsch resonator, that's pretty much the usual suspects for me on the road.
Nice. Now you say Strat, is that the signature Strat
you got
with Fender? Yeah.
That's the only Strat I own at the moment.
Really?
I've given or sold or just shed everything else because that Strat is just like it's on a very high pedestal.
Cool. And what's that based on?
It's based on it's kind of like got a 70s sort of neg, because that's the first Strat I ever had was a 70s with a bullet truss rod.
Yep. And
had no tremolo at all. That was lent to me by this very, very, very generous fella. And yeah, so when it became mine, I went and like took it to my guitar repairer, went to the music shop, bought the Floyd Rose, said, hey, let's put this on. He was like, okay, drilled holes through the fed stock, put it all on, and it was, instant kind of, whoa, this is fun. But yeah, eventually that headstock snapped, of course, because the 70s were quite thin up that end, and I think it would have snapped anyway with all the idiot things that I was doing with it.
Yeah.
So I got another replacement neck. I got up to like neck number 3 on that particular body. It was the original black body. And then it ended up in the Hard Rock Cafe in Melbourne in the window, and I didn't see it for a few. They asked me for it, and I said, okay, sure, I'm not using it. I went in there and don't know where it is now. I'd love to know, because that's long gone, of course, that establishment. But it got hit by the sun a lot every day in the same position in the window, and last time I saw it, the whole guitar, like the pick guard had all like gone like this. The neck had it looked like a Salvador Dali painting. It was all
really?
Like, yeah, it was pretty messed up. And that was the end of that. But to get back there with this Strat, it's been pretty cool. Like I started having like kind of feelings for it again. I thought, I might build something, And then Fender approached me, and it was really one of those kind of like, wow, this is really, I'm kind of humbled, and I can't believe this is actually happening. So much that I just sort of forgot about it. And then when it turned up, it was like, whoa, And to boot, like the one that I've only had one particular version of it in my hand, so I haven't had to go, hey, give me another one. I don't like this one. The first one I got, actually, I tell a lie. This is the second one, because the first one, it felt a bit, I didn't even play it or anything. I just grabbed it and went, no, it's not balanced properly. Can you try again, make it? And I think they maybe lightened up the body or lightened up the neck or whatever, and then they came back and was like, there it is. That's better.
Cool.
Then I took it and got it refretted. We put my big frets on that Frank Grabissa did here in Sydney.
Yep.
And yeah, that's about it. Just like did my usual stuff with the bridge and the nut, just cleaned them up, made them all really, really happy. Little bit of wet and dry, a bit of lube. Put my strings on it, boom, and then first gig was like, you just knew straight away. It was just, damn, this has got a voice. It's really, really got a voice. And
cool.
I just love the comfort of it. It's got a really nice, the neck is a little bit like the Eric Clapton.
Bit of a V?
V. Yep. It's got a V, but it's not like ow, it doesn't sort of feel like it's a subtle V, but it just fits in really nice there.
Yep.
And the radius is not so like vintage curve. It's more sort of flat, sort of modern, which is cool for me. I've come to like that radius more, I think. And yeah, it's just a humdinger. It's a really good one.
Cool.
But it's arguably the best Strat I think I've ever had. It's really that good. Yeah.
Nice. And the other Strat you were talking about that was in the window at the Hard Rock Cafe, was that the one that I mentioned was in the film clips back in the early days?
Yeah. That's the one. I mean, that went through so many changes. It ended up the original pickups, which was 70s with the grey plates on the bottom. One of them died in Germany, went sort of microphonic and just started, no signal and just all noise.
Yep.
So we went into this music shop and I didn't know anything about these pickups, but the guy was like, take these. This would be really good for you. And it was the DiMarzio humbucking stacks, the ones that Yngwie uses. And they were, because it still sounded like a Strat pickup, but suddenly they were like really quiet. Basically a humbucker in a Strat, shape. Put a set of those in, and that they lasted for a long time. And then I tried a few other bits and pieces, but I think what ended up being the pickups that were in it when I went to the Hard Rock with probably the second set of DiMarzios or something. I just, with all the sweat and, getting knocked around and stuff so much, things were like getting destroyed quite a lot back then.
Yep. So what pickups are in the signature model?
There's the Texas Hot, whatever they're called. The
Texas Specials.
Yeah. So a little bit overwound, but not super. They just sort of, they gurgle and they sound like they got that P90-ish kind of vibe, but a Strat is always going to be super, pointy, by default.
Yeah.
A lot of it is to do with the bridge, and that cavity and the bridge block. It just goes ping, so you need to pick up, in my humble opinion, that just sort of rounds off the edges a little bit, sort of just chills it out a little bit. Tellys, again, ouch, Tellys are great. They're pretty pointy, so you need to kind of chill them out a bit.
Yeah.
They're still gonna like cut your head off in a good way.
Yeah. But you went on the road with Barnsley at quite a young age too. That was just after the Injectors. I think the Injectors went and opened for him, didn't they? Or
that's how that also happened, because I wouldn't have met Jimmy if I wasn't sleeping on. Well, he wasn't officially our manager at the time, but Brent Eccles, he brought us all over the Nullarbor, and it organised a couple of months of just 9 shows a week just to see if we were going to survive. Basically, it was an acid test. It really was. Like, it was first, let's get over this hurdle. There was no talk of like, then you're going to make a record and the end of the day. It was just like, no, come over to Sydney. I've got 9 shows a week. Let's just see how we go with that. 9 shows a week, okay. And it was in that first week that he was in the studio doing some drumming for Jimmy, and he just said, I've got a guitar player sleeping on my couch. Can I bring him in? And Jimmy said, yeah, of course, bring him in. And I walked in, literally amp was set up in a second, which was my 200-watt high watt that I had brought over. And I was playing in amongst it was Rick Brewster, Jim Hilburn, and Brent on drums. So it was just the 4 of us, and Jimmy, of course, on vocals. And it was just loud as like I'd never experienced before in a control room. And then at the end of that day, sort of mentioned that I was doing a few gigs and blah, blah, blah. And then he came down to one of the gigs that we were doing, which was a Tuesday night at the Middle Harbour Skiff Club. And that's when he saw, I think, the last, few songs of the set. And he said, well, that was really good. I want you to come and do this tour. And I said, no.
Really?
No. I just said, I can't. I said, I've just brought this band over the Nullarbor. And he was like, oh, yeah, of course. I get it. Yeah. Well, then you can do the support as well. And then, I think Brent and I just looked at each other and went, okay. It was like, no, it wasn't my, we'll get back to you. It was just like, yeah, okay. So we kept doing our little 9 shows a week around Sydney, and then we took off. Within probably 2-3 months or something, there was some rehearsals and things were just like flying. As far as like, it was definitely not a lot of idle time. And yeah, that's when I literally still had only the black Strat, a red profile, which had been stripped, was a profile which I see now. Squires and profiles from that period are selling for like crazy money now.
Really?
I just had it was a profile Strat, stripped and then stained and then lacquered. It kind of had this like reddish violin finish that my friend George did in Perth, and we put Bill Lawrence pickups in it, the original ones, the really, really nice ones. Floyd Rose, of course, and that was like my spare guitar, but it was actually quite a weapon. Like, I used that on a lot of stuff because it had more of a mid-rangey kind of sound. Of course, a rosewood neck, different to maple neck, which was the black one. So I had a rosewood and a maple neck Strat, both with, set up pretty nicely. And Jimmy had this guitar that he just bought in San Francisco, and it was like a project. Someone had done some awful things to it, but it was a 60. I just recently got it restored by Frank Ribissa and to its original kind of vibe, and gave it back to Jimmy because I thought it's a nice gesture. But he gave me that. It was a Gibson Melody Maker Junior, which ironically was my first guitar, which was a Melody Maker Junior. And this one was the real cheeseboard one that like Joan Jett plays, It just had one big stupid like distortion sort of humbucker whacked in it, just horrible. But it was good for kind of just like a few rhythm parts here and there. Beautiful piece of wood. It's like 68, beautiful old Bristolian woods. And so it was like, wow, I've got 3 guitars now, But that was a very Jimmy thing to do. Like, he just loves giving things to people. It's like he buys things, and inevitably he doesn't keep a lot of things for himself. He's always like going, here, have this, have that. Really? But he does buy 2. The joke is he buys 2 of everything, and I know why, because it's like he knows he might end up with 1 if he buys 2. Sure. Because between family and just him like giving things, he's the most generous person I think I've ever met. Okay. He might end up with 1. So that's why he buys 2. But yeah, that guitar was like the first kind of like bit of vintage guitar that I'd ever sort of gotten to, feel it was, wow, this is mine. It's cool. And then I found an old, again, a Bill Lawrence pickup at Troy House of Music in Melbourne. It was just sitting there in a box. I said, can I have that? And it was like, yeah. Someone had brought it in. It was like, put that in. And that was what was in there for a long time. That was much, much nicer than whatever was in there. Some kind of super distortion thingy. It's just like, yeah. Man,
it strikes me that you say you don't have that many guitars. I thought you'd be one of these guys that just has a room or a warehouse full of them.
I'm not really into the whole. It actually upsets me and hurts my feelings to see guitars not being used by anybody in particular, and especially myself. I just don't believe in hoarding or just having them for the collecting sort of thing. It's like just so I can say I've got this many. I like to use everything I've got, and if I have ended up with a few things that I think, I've got this now. You were really good. You were a catalyst. But now you can be someone else's, Like I like giving them to my family, friends, or a charity or something.
Yep.
Because there is that quest. I have to say, there's a quest for the ultimate sort of like I've been searching for really great Hofner bass for years, and I found one recently at the Bass Centre down in Melbourne, and it's a '66 Senator, and it's just like. Yeah, it's the definitive Hofner bass for me. So I've had other like hollow body things with flat wounds and stuff. I just, let them go because it's like, I've got that now. Yeah, it's like tick box, Yeah. I don't believe in having like multiples. Like why, like I can see why you want to have 20 Telecasters, but I like just 2 good ones. It's good enough for me. You know what I mean? Like, and I've got a really good example of a Tele, and it's so good that I've had 4 attempts, I think it is, from getting ones made by the custom shop, and they arrive, and I'm like, it's good. It's not like it's bad or anything, but then I'll go and pick up the Old Faithful, and it's just like, oh.
Some guitars just have a magic about them, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's not fair comparing a guitar that's had, what is now 50 years of like to get it shit together to something that's just been put together too. That's always a bit of a. It takes, at least a couple of years for a guitar to settle. I find, you know.
Man,
that's what was amazing about my signature Strat actually, because I thought, you know, it's a new guitar. How much am I going to love this, you know? But it just felt like instantly. The only thing I had to do to make it feel like literally feel better was I took all the hardware off, and just got 000 steel wool and just got rid of that really shiny black finish and just made it like matte.
Yep.
But it only took me 40 minutes to do that.
Yep.
And it just instantly felt not so squeaky and, you know, some people just, you know, love the guitars to be shiny forever, but it kind of bugs me.
Yeah. I'm with you, man. If they're too nice, you don't want to let anybody play it.
Yeah,
or...
man, it's not like, you know, it's not like a car or something, you know.
Yeah. Mate, fast forward to now, I do believe you've got an album coming out on if I have a look at my little whiteboard down here, the 28th of August, Sunset Suburbia. Tell us about that, mate.
Well, this record was actually finished around February, March of this year. I think we were going to put it out earlier, but because, you know, COVID and everything, it's just kind of, we just thought, you know what, there's no rush. The tour that we were going to do has been moved literally like almost a year, like more like 10 and a half, 11 months. The band tour is now in 2021. So we've just sort of elongated it a little bit. And yeah, that's totally fine by me. I think I probably finished the record a lot quicker than I thought I was going to. So that kind of accelerated stuff. But it's been a kind of everyone's had to kind of adapt to this kind of, suddenly there's like a big hole, you know, and you sort of go, okay, well, touring is off the menu for a bit. So I've started another record in the meantime.
Cool.
Which, a blues record, because I felt, one thing I haven't done is I've done a solo this and a solo that, but I haven't made a solo blues effort where it's just literally just me doing everything. And, kind of out of necessity to a large degree, because when I started it, we were really, really locked down. So I couldn't just say, hey, come on over, you know.
Yeah.
And it's kind of turned into like a whole new sound for me, I'm hopefully people are going to dig it.
Cool. And you've got a launch on the 29th at Lizotte's in Newcastle. Man, I've got to say, that's a fucking fantastic venue. I've played that one a few times.
It's a good one.
Beautiful.
My brother and sister-in-law made it really cozy for the patrons and the musicians alike, you know.
First time I ever played there, my friend Dave Leslie, who you know, made the trip up from Sydney to come and see me play. I was playing in a Queen tribute show at the time. And
that's a tough gig.
Mate, that was a really cool gig. Gig.
Not the easiest thing doing Brian May stuff. Wow.
No. It was a lot of fun though, man. Like technology now. I actually had a guy on a week or two ago who was the guitar player from the We Will Rock You musicals, and he didn't have the technology then when he was learning it to slow things down the way I did, because everybody was saying, man, your vibrato and everything's exactly like the record. Yeah. It's because I was slowing it down and learning it slow and then speeding it up and really cop the feel. But Dave made the trip up from Sydney up to Newcastle to come to that particular venue because he just said, man, you haven't been there before. Lizotte's Newcastle's just amazing. And yeah, man, kudos to your brother for having such an awesome chain of restaurants, theatre restaurants.
I mean, only the one now, but for a while there he had Central Coast, DY and Newcastle, but it was a choice of life versus work. You know?
So it's down to the one now, is it?
To the one, yeah.
Yeah.
He's so much happier now that he's not spending too much of his life on the Pacific Highway, like just driving in between them all. You know, it's just too much. Yeah. So, yeah, I think when you know that Brian started in the music business catering for bands and studios, you know, like when bands used to have recording budgets that would allow for catering.
Yeah.
Those were the days. He really kind of has that affinity with the artists. And I think that's because that's when punters come, our beloved punters come into that room, they feel something whether they realize it or not. But the love is coming from the band's being so happy there to start with, and the affinity that he has with them. And I think any musician would tell you that some gigs that you do annually, thankfully for me, I can't say there's a lot of them, but sometimes you just turn up and you go, wow, I really feel that music is not very welcomed in this establishment, but I'm going to do my gig anyway. Yeah. You just have to turn the other cheek. And if you can't have that ideal, and you can't just sort of go, respect me, love me, like that's an ideal, and you have to let go of that. You just got to do your gig. And I've learned not to take it personally, but sometimes you just think, wow, I feel about as welcome as a fart in a spacesuit in this gig right now. But the punters are here, and that's all that matters, and I'm going to play to them. But the venue does matter. It's nice to turn up and feel like you really are welcomed that day,
Yeah,
not just some like, oh, don't know, we got the pokies, we got the bistro, we got other ways of making money. We don't really give a fucking shit about you, but come on in. It's like that kind of mentality, which is the worst case scenario. I know that's a terrible picture to paint, but occasionally we do cop that as musicians, and I think any musician can say that. And it's like, whoa, music's really an afterthought in this place.
Yeah.
But hey, we'll still say thank you for even just having music. But God, you could learn some appreciation. But
and that goes down to the audience as well. And I just remembered something just now hearing you talk about that. I saw you a few years ago now at the Lone Star Tavern here on the Gold Coast, and you were playing acoustic, and there was this one drunk woman who had her back to you and was just talking over the most quietest parts. And I reminded of this last night. I went and saw Jeff Martin play just down the road here, and exactly the same thing.
Great.
There was a table
I'm so glad
full.
you went to a gig.
Yeah, that was the first time out for a while. Yeah, but I had a table full of pissed dickheads beside me who were showing each other shit on their phone during the whole thing, and not paying attention to the music. How do you deal with that? Do you just tune people like that out?
It's hard. It's hard. You just sort of. I think if you let it affect you, it's probably you're going to regret it. That's one thing I've learned. Although it's really hard not to sometimes, because we're human. We're not like machines. And I've exploded a few times on stage, and then, because I don't drink at gigs and haven't done for a long, long time, whatever explosion happens, it's kind of like I sober up pretty quickly and go, oh, I wish I didn't do that, because now I just hate myself for that.
Yeah.
But the back of my mind still goes, no, you know what? You're just human, and they've got no respect for that, one particular person or that table or whatever it is. And it's like, you've paid your money, yes, to come in, but, just stay home. Like, I don't love money that much. You know what I mean? Yep. Like, if you're going to do that, just stay home.
Yep.
Because these people, the majority, thankfully, you always have to think about the majority. And they've all come to, like, experience some music and forget about everything. And looking at crap on your phone is hardly forgetting about everything. So if my job is to give escapism to people, then let me do that. I will do that for you. I'm pretty sure I can do that. But if you're just going to, not even give me any attention, then how can I do my job? That's all I can say to that.
Man, I just remembered actually doing a gig at Lizotte's in DY with that Queen show I was talking about. And man, your brother actually had on the menus, please turn off your phones and respect the artists. And there was a woman, the very front table, very front seat at the front table, like basically right at my feet, with her back to me, on her phone. She was so engrossed in that phone that our singer came over and sort of looked over the top and went, how's Facebook going there, love? She was completely oblivious. The whole room started heckling her. She was completely oblivious. It took for somebody to get up out of the crowd, walk up to her and take the phone out of her hand for her to even realize that the whole place was just laughing at her going, why are you here, love? Like, come on, you're here to see some music.
Oh, no, look, I've seen this movie myself. But yeah, I mean, I thankfully, I just, I don't think I'll ever like not be affected by it. That's impossible. But I've learned to just kind of, I have to rise above it. You know, you have to kind of. I don't want to be down there, like, because I know how it feels. So, you know, I guess that's where you just kind of go, you know what? I'm just going to go into the music because that's where kind of I am 90% of the time anyway.
Yeah.
And just like tune into the sound that I'm making and just like put the bubble in, because it's like music is I'm here to get intoxicated with the music.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, you know, in a couple of hours time, I'll be in a car, you know, like, and it's like, that's the best part of my day. I'm not letting anyone like rob that from me.
Yeah. Mark, I know you said you only had an hour that you could spare, mate. We've just hit that. So I'm going to cut to the chat room there and just run a few questions by you if you've still got a couple of minutes to go, mate.
Sure.
NATO, I saw that you're in there, buddy. Type in that question that you sent me personally the other day, mate, because I'd like to ask Mark that myself, but I'm just going to scan through quickly. There's a lot of kudoses there. Let's see. Question. Ditching the Johnny Diesel name, was that a record company or business decision?
That was my decision. It wasn't anyone else's. You know, I mean, it's pretty obvious I wasn't going to keep calling it that because it wasn't, you know, that was those particular people, and would have been like just carrying the name and going, well, it's the same thing, but it's different people now. It's like, nah. But I did figure out that, you know what, people have gotten to know that part of it, so I'll just keep that, and then we don't have to like, get too complicated here. And we actually did it in stages, because the very first single, if anyone's got it out there, the Love Junk single, which came before the record, still had Johnny Diesel, because I actually did that artwork myself. It looks like it too. That was the whole idea. I wanted it to look cottage, you know. It was like, and they were like, no, we're not going to redo it. We're going to use your actual cutout, whatever letters I'd used, and we'll stick it on there. I was like, okay. And then it was like a transition of like, drop that, just keep the Diesel. But the band was named after the bass player, I have to point out again. It's like I was never intended to have that name. It was a nameless band that played every Tuesday night in this little bar in Perth, and suddenly someone made a joke about him because his name was John Delzell, and that was it. It was like, that's funny. Put it in the paper for a couple of weeks, and so we can all have a giggle, and then things, you know, just didn't bother to change it.
Yeah. Mate, it's got here that a live rig rundown would be a fantastic watch. So next time you're up in my neck of the woods, I'm going to hit you up and come around to it, maybe pre-show. And
that'd be really cool.
Yeah, if you're up for that.
Well, especially because I have a new system now that is yet to be kind of really showed properly, and it's probably the most bespoke pedal board that I've ever owned. Well, not probably, it is. It's kind of like on par with the P. Cornish rig that I had in the 90s, which was very much built for me. And this one's the same, but just in a pedal board version, which is everything that I need in a pedal form, and completely custom like designed, all the ergonomics of it, all the way it sort of is for how my feet fit on it and stuff.
Cool.
It's just amazing. Yeah, it's not just get a board, put pedals on it, cable tie it, there's your pedal board. It's a completely custom design. It's like, you know, I think I said something along the line when I first saw it. I was like, wow, man, because I've been watching the Game of Thrones trailer at the beginning when they show all those things going up and down like this. It's all like CGI, you know. It's like, whoa, it's like Game of Thrones pedal board.
Funnily enough, you're talking about the Cornish rig there. One of the questions is, tell us about the ridiculous Cornish rig from the 90s. How did that come about?
Well, you say ridiculous. I say beautiful. It was pretty ridiculous. When it got to 3, not ridiculous if your gear is only traveling in semi-trailers or containers that get loaded on ships, you know. But so beautiful in the sense of like, every cable and every little component was just put together so well, and there was no need to put a noise cancelling thing at the end of it or anything, because everything cancelled itself. The power even got cleaned along the way. Like, you plug it in and the power gets cleaned. Like, that's Pete Cornish's ethos, you know.
Yep.
Yeah, well, that was, you know, I wanted a bunch of things. I was like, I want this, I want that, I want this, I want all these sounds that are now, you know, miniaturized. Like you know, what's happened to everything in this world? Recording, you know, what the iPhone is capable of doing in this big, you know.
Yep.
That was as small as it could get back then for what I wanted. I wanted all these rack effects, you know. But now, yeah, I mean, the quality of sound that I can get for all those effects that I need, just for one-offs, especially like the HX effects that I've got from Line 6, that wasn't in existence back then. That was the specs of it, the chips didn't exist.
Yeah.
Now it does, you know, so I can have all that and then have my boutique pedals and everything's, the signal chain is, you know, just perfect. There's no like dumbing it down. And I know that plugging in here and coming into my amp, I'm not going like, oh, gee, I wish it sounded like I could just plug like it does when I just plug straight into my amp. I know I'm not, you know, missing out on anything.
Yep.
And yeah, it's like, if anything, I know what plugging straight into an amp sounds like. Yeah, I do it all the time when I'm recording, but then I go through a bunch of, you know, things to make it, hype it up even more. But yeah, on stage, I think that's kind of like, I wouldn't say it's underrated or overrated, I should say, but yeah, I do love a few pedals at the front that just really make the signal kind of come to life, you know. So that whole thing of like, oh, it's not as good as plugging straight into the amp. It's like, yeah, well, we know what that sounds like. It's pretty flat, actually. You know, let me show you this pedal and see if you like going straight in after that, you know. I bet you don't, you know. So yeah, for that pedal for me is probably number one, is that the first compressor that I put at the front, which is not so much of a squishy. It's just like a wake up call for everybody. It just goes bam and then hits the wah and then just keeps going after that. So there's a few buffers along the way, but yeah, it's all about the right gain structure.
Cool.
Especially, you know, I use pretty low wattage amps a lot of the times, like 15 watt Vox AC15s and AC30s, which, you know, that's 30 watts of EL84. But because I've got so much good clean gain along the way, I can sort of build it up and make it sound a lot bigger than just the 30 little watts, you know.
Nice. I've also got another question here about the backstory on the Maton Minis that you use live. I'm going to let you answer that, and I'll be back in 30 seconds, mate. But if you just want to talk about that, I'll be right back.
Well, yeah, the Maton Mini was a travel guitar, and it really just started as a little gift that came my way when I was living in New York, and made by Mark Lizotte at Maton, who's now since departed, but he was the foreman there. And he just would make these little guitars out of leftovers, like remnants of wood, in his shed at home. And I got hold of one and I said, this thing actually would be probably really good if we put a pickup in it so I could play it at the gig. And he was a bit like, really? We've got like proper ones to do that. And I was like, yeah, but I think this one won't feed back as much because it's smaller and doesn't have that body that's just going to be problematic. And lo and behold, it definitely was a lot louder, a lot less prone to feedback. And yeah, then I asked him for a 12-string on the success of the 6-string. And again, he said, oh, I'm not sure that's going to work with a small body, but let me give it a go. And yeah, came back with the first 12-string, which I've still got here. It doesn't go on the road anymore because it's like the magic flute. And yeah, the rest is, I guess, the history, as they say. And then they started making them in the factory with the Maton name on them. But they started out as Morans, made out of Mark Lizotte garage. Awesome.
Well, they sound absolutely huge. It's
well, yeah, I mean, I think it's a testimony that when you're plugging it in, especially with a band, for me, you don't need all the body. The body's not going to do you any good, really. It's just going to cause feedback problems. So get rid of the bulk and just get the sound. And the mids are like what a lot of acoustic guitar players kind of forget, that you still need mids. And part of my acoustic guitar sound on stage is the clean DI, but blended with the amp sound, and that gives it that real front. Because, yeah, I mean, my favorite acoustic guitar records like Neil Young and stuff, they've got that saturation and that dirty 1176 compressor sound that kind of gives it that real prominence in the harmonics. It's not just a clean DI. So blended a clean DI with some dirt, it's always a good combo in my books. Yeah,
Mate,
it's the thing you can't forget about acoustic is that it's acoustic, yes, but at the end of the day, it's still guitar. And guitar needs mids.
Yeah.
It needs harmonics. To make it sit out in the mix.
There's a question here. It says, I know it's not chit chats with Vox Cats, but Mark is a world-class blues wailer. Talking about your singing. Is this learned, or is this just who/what he is? Even his speaking voice has the feels. Good question there, Sharpie.
Thanks, man. Thank you, person. I'm not sure if it's male or female, but
that's Michael Sharp. He's a good friend of mine, cool. Sharpie.
Yeah, look, I just, I mean, it just seems to resonate with me. And I don't, it's not like I make a real conscious thing about it, but when I open up my mouth, it's sort of what comes out. So, thank you. That's a real compliment. But yeah, I mean, singing for me, like everything, I'm still like trying different things, working on different little rooms in the house of my voice. It's like a house, and you kind of like find different little rooms and kind of explore. And yeah, the best thing for me is just like be like singing all the time, because it's a muscle at the end of the day. And like as much as I don't want to do like 8 shows in a row, it's quite challenging and everything. But I tell you, when you get to like 5 and then you go, whoa, I'm blowing out here, and then you just hit this like power band, and it's just, and that's something that there's just no substitute for that you just you've got to use it. It's like anything, like you can't be like a world-class rugby player and not be just playing all the time. It's a bit like that for singing with me. So
when did you start singing, mate? Did you start before you started playing guitar?
It was kind of shyness that sort of stopped me. I think at the beginning I was like a bit reluctant, and I was in bands with singers, so I'd be like, it's cool, you do that. And then slowly but surely kind of got pulled out of me, and then when I got ousted from the band that I was in for being too loud, can't imagine that would ever be the case. That was when I sort of had to pick up the slack, because the other guys were like, well, we're going to stay with you, but you're going to have to, you're going to be the singer now. I was like, whoa. The first couple of gigs, not a problem, and then you realize, shit, you blow out your voice so badly the first gig, and then you realize, damn, how am I going to do this again? And that just comes with experience, I can do things with my voice now that it sounds like I'm maybe really pushing it or hurting it or whatever, but I'm not at all. It's my talking voice and my singing voice are like they live in different houses, which is pretty funny.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just, I think you still use this part of your body to shape the sound. There's no doubt that it comes from around these area, but the more that I use the rest of my body, especially my abdomen, my bread box, or the less strain, and that's a relaxing thing. I think, the moment I tense up, I really, really try not to, but like when stuff is happening or something technically goes wrong, it's just like relax, because the minute you tense up, that's when you start doing things and then you kind of have to like dig yourself out of the dirt. It might take you 2 songs. But no one might even notice, but and being really, really relaxed is your best friend, like with your vocal cords. That's one thing I've learned.
Cool. There's another question here from Big Fella Link. Does Mark find expression easiest by voice or guitar?
I find it easiest probably when I'm doing both of them together.
Yeah.
Like it's not like I can sing without playing guitar, and I can play guitar without singing, but it's when I'm recording, I notice it's like, it's just a bit more conscious,
Yeah.
Self-conscious. And that's a beautiful thing. I was actually thinking about this. It's funny you should ask this question, because I was thinking about this morning about how, it's a real kind of fluid thing when you're playing and singing together. And fluidity is the ultimate thing, and I think when I'm singing and playing, it's just, I do things that I probably wouldn't do if I was separated them, They come together in this alchemy sort of thing. It's pretty amazing.
It's funny that, mate. I've done a bit of work in production over the years, and I've come across people who are singer-songwriters, singer guitar players, and they go to do the vocals without the guitar in their hand, and then something all of a sudden is missing. So it's like, here, man, just put this guitar on. We're not plugged in. And strum, and I think just the whole way you're talking about using your diaphragm and everything, they're used to anchoring a certain way when they're playing guitar, and maybe
it's also that's like the lilt, finding the lilt, that lilt in the song, the space, the pocket, as they say, finding that pocket. It really, it's been the magic. Fix it a few times in studios with people. It's like, what's going on? Like, let's, hang on, let them play guitar. See, and then we'll see, like, we'll do a take like that and see if it just feels more natural,
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. Incredible.
I'm going to squeeze in just one more question, because I know you said you did have places to be. Hey, Rick, can you ask Mark about his time in New York and using Fender Blues Juniors?
Yeah. Well, I went to New York with no peak cornice rig. It was in storage here. And it was kind of fun to start building a little, I must have kind of knew that, like, whatever I'm going to need in New York is not going to be that big, So I had one little Pro Junior, not Blues, very similar size, but Pro Junior's just got two knobs, just tone and volume, very simple. But it's probably arguably the most voxy sounding Fender amp you could ever find, because it's two EL84s and a 15 watt sort of design and a 10-inch Jensen speaker. So it's got really nice distortion. Hot mids, really hot mids. And I started doing little shows around the East Village, places like Mercury Lounge and Brownies, and Arlene Grocery was where I ended up doing the most shows. And I was like, this is good, but when I get out of the rehearsal room, I needed sort of more firepower. So I went and bought another Pro Junior and just had it running in stereo. Yeah. And that was funny, because I'd been away from little combos or just little amplifiers for a long time, being with the peak cornice rig with power amps, and it was a massive system. So getting back to like gurgling amps that were kind of like on the edge of like feedback all the time was kind of really exciting and fun. But having said that, it only didn't take me long before I was like, this is good, but I miss the kind of chunk, I miss the kind of a bit of chunk headroom.
Yep.
And I knew that if I brought a bigger amp on stage, it would just kill everything, kill the band that I had at the time. So I bought a MiG 50, which was a Sovtech little 50 watt head, and I found a 212 Vox cabinet. And what I did was at Arlene Grocery, I'd stick it under the stage and sort of hide it, squirrel it away, and just run a signal to that as well. So when I was up there on stage, I could hear this kind of, kind of body, but it wasn't it wasn't hitting people's heads.
Yep.
It wasn't hitting my head, but it just gave it this like secret weapon sort of thing. So I had two little practice amps basically on stage, and then but this 50 watt chunky thing underneath the stage, just kind of giving it some power. And it was pretty kind of unorthodox, but it was good. It was just kind of like, I think when you get used to the same gigs, you start like tweaking it, you start going, this is good, but what can I do to like make it even better? It's like a house, like the house band sort of thing. They get really comfortable and set up, and that's kind of what I was doing there. So yeah, when I got back, I brought those two little amps for this tour, and I was with I had Richard Neitz doing guitar teching on that one, and he kind of looked at me and went, "You sure you want to use those, boss?" And I went, "Yeah, I'm really used to them." I'm like, "Look, man, it'll go through the PA, it'll be huge." He was like, "Okay." He's like, "You don't mind if I'm just going to go to the Midnight Oils lockup and get a couple of AC30s?" I'm like, "Yeah, okay, sure." He went and got these AC30s that had been on the road with Midnight Oil, and they were reissue ones. They weren't like old vintage ones, but they were like really good, like good versions of them, and put me into one of those, like two stereo, one each side of the drum kit, and I was like, yeah, what was I thinking? And then that started because that was my first real, like I'd use Voxes in the studio, love them, yeah, but I'd never used them for a live thing, so that was that's when I went down the rabbit hole with Vox again, but when as I started this talk tonight, not by choice, but by just pure sheer luck, my brother left me that AC50. So my love affair with amp started with Vox. And so, it is pretty amazing that I'm still, a Vox lover after all these years. But it's an addictive sound. It's chime and harmonic content. And it's just in spades. And then, I can just put pedals on top of that, if I want different flavors and stuff. But that chime and harmonic content is just, it's so addictive.
So somebody's just asked whether you think that it's true that a lot of the older ones have got that magic. The exact question, is it truth or nostalgic myth that the tone from 1960s Vox AC15s or 30s sounds so much better than present day Vox?
You look, there's always something that's pretty special about a vintage piece of gear. But I find up until now, that might have been the case. But in the last few years, they've done some models like, the Heritage, which sadly they stopped making, but there's enough of them around. The Heritage series ones they're pretty. Yeah, there's nothing that I lust for with those. It's just like, there it is. And the speaker, the Blue Bulldog has got a lot to do with it, I think. But the less kind of stuff on the design, as in the circuit itself, pulling it down, the better. Like the older ones were, pretty simple. Like when the ones with like this channel and that and more stuff on it, it's like, no. They generally don't get the wooden spoon for me. So the ones that are just simple top boost, and you can run one channel into the other if you want. But I generally don't run them past, like whether it's an AC15 Heritage or an AC30 Heritage, which is what I use mostly. It's on about 2. I set it up as clean and as loud as I can. I don't go for there's a few different modes that you can make it sound bigger and louder and more distorted, but it's like, nah, it's not headroom. So I set it up the cleanest, the loudest it can be, and then I build on that with my pedals, that's proves to be the best thing for me.
Yep.
So people have, commented when they plug into them, they go, it's just
they're loud.
Or they just couldn't figure it out, because it's pentode, triode, 2 modes, and then another bass boost here. Generally, the bass boost is just a pain in the ass. It just really muddies it up, I should say. And it kind of, it's like fun, when you, especially with a Strat, you sort of pump it in and go, oh, that's fat switch. And it's like, nah, it's just like, it's just mess.
Man, for me, a Vox, you need a treble booster. I never tried one until I was doing the Queen thing, and then Greg Fryer would send me treble boosters to beta test before he'd send them to Brian May. And man, I tried that, just opened it up, but the fucking volume was just I can't use that.
Well, I mean, what you're doing is that's designed so you run that amp into overdrive. And then what happens inevitably when you push an amp into that sort of overdrive? You lose your point. You lose that cut. The teeth. So you want to put the teeth back. That's where the treble booster does. It just puts that, and the idea of that, of mushing up the amp and then putting the teeth back on it, so you can hear every nuance and every bit of articulation. It's like, boom, that's it. Well, you're in solo heaven straight away.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Tick.
Yeah. Mate, I just want to ask you one question before I round it up, if you've got time. How do you view the fretboard? Everybody is so different with how they approach soloing. Is there a particular way that you view the fretboard?
It's a feel thing. All it is for me, it's like different areas of the board have different feelings, you know, like this is that sort of feeling. Here it's like moan, you know, here's like, you know, it's a piece of wood that's got a length of scale to it, and you know down here is going to do that, and around here it's that, and then up there is that. So it's really, that's all it is to me. I don't really kind of think about it much more than that. I don't sort of start looking at like shapes and stuff. It's really, you know, the range, much like a human voice. You know, when you want to be emotive with a certain register, you sort of go there. And when you want to say something up there, you go there. It's the same with the guitar, you know. It's really, but there's this tonality, like playing like high up on the fat strings where you can play it down lower on the, you know, skinnier string or something, but that fat string has that sound up there. So you do that. And the same with bass, you know, like I love the sound of the bass, like play it up high, but on the fatter strings, you know, instead, you know, you could do it easier down there, but just moving around on the E and the A string to get that kind of tone and the way the notes have to slide around each other. That's a vibe.
So are you more of an ear player, mate, or do you know if I'm in A, well, I can play an A bar chord here, and these are the notes that fit in around that?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's just I tend to just sort of sail into it. I just let my gut feeling guide me, and you know, occasionally you'll sort of just slide somewhere and you go, I want to start here because that's what it feels like, and they go, whoops, one semitone back, you know, okay. And I mean, that's the thing about the guitar. No matter what key the song is, you can find a place to say something on every part of that neck. You know, doesn't matter what key it is. So, yeah, I mean, you've always got those familiar shapes. You know, if it's okay, I want it to sound happy or majorish, or I want it to sound minor. You know, you do those sort of things. But I think just the voice of the string and the tonality of that string at different points on the neck is what guides me, you know. Because the way you shorten them and lengthen them, and just the difference between the big wound string and that skinnier stuff, the unwound, is such a different. It's color and shade and light and everything. So you just kind of use it. It's also nice to, you know, grab a bunch of strings. Like I love, when you kind of sort of bend up to a string and kind of get two or three strings all kind of just
absolutely, it's like screaming at the same time. I mean, you can do that with a harmony pedal, of course, you know, but it's just something more organic and more. I know exactly what you mean, man. I've been trying to do more of that lately myself. Instead of bending just that B string, fucking grab the G next to it as well, and just that dissonance of it not being the right note, but it just. This is something the way it all reacts. The
amount of sort of space you can occupy with just one note in that case, you know what I mean? Like with a guitar, it's pretty amazing, and you should never you know, just always remember, you know, how much you can just occupy with just one note. I think that's a good practice for any guitar player.
Man, you said you use really heavy strings. How about picks? Do you use quite a heavy pick?
Yeah, I'll use a Delrin, which is a nice material because it doesn't. They still get really furry, but they fur up a lot slower than like the kind of what it's made of, nitrocelluloid, or any other material for that matter. The Delrin is like a nylon, I believe, and it's got a nice, smooth, really nice beveled edge when it's brand new, and you can kind of quickly. I do this thing where I sort of do a look at on my trousers to kind of sharpen it up a little bit.
Oh, cool!
I'll just grab another one. But it's like a nervous twitch. I just want that clean edge all the time, and the Delrins are really good. Grover Orman make them for me, and it's probably the most durable pick I've come across because I used to just use the nitrocellulose before that, and they just crack and fur up really quick.
Yeah.
When I look at it, I found a pick the other day was from a long, long time ago, and I was like, "Whoa! How did I use this? Just awful." You just get used to anything, I suppose. But yeah, that's what I use for the electrics, and then the acoustic I use something that's more like an 88 nylon.
Yep.
With quite a bit of flick in it, because as much as I'd like to be able to really articulate, especially when I'm soloing on a 6 string, for instance, when I flip to the Telecaster pickup, it's just really good to have a pick that's got a bit of spring in it, because for fast strumming and not breaking so many strings. Those are 2 reasons.
Yeah.
You know, I want to do like real sort of flamenco-y style strumming. It needs to have some give. Yeah. And if I used a heavy pick on the acoustics, I'd just be banging strings, like popping them all night, I reckon.
Yeah, right, yeah. Do you use your fingers much? Not finger picking, but I mean actually just getting in there single note lines and smashing with your fingers?
I do this thing where I tuck the pick in my palm, like I'll just be playing and it just goes in there.
This thing, which is what I do.
I'm really used to that.
Yeah.
It's something similar to that, yeah. It's just kind of like, it just goes in there like that.
Yep,
you know, just kind of. And it's just, I like to have my fingers ready. I like to be able to use them at any time, because fingers are great. You know, can really get a different thing with fingers. You know, I'm not like married to a pick, but when it comes to like hitting a power chord, you know, the cliche of the cliches, that's where I want to pick.
It's the funniest thing, man. My first big guitar hero was Mark Knopfler, and he uses his fingers and he uses these 2.
It's almost Spanish.
Yeah. But I cannot play with my fingers unless I'm holding a pick, and I do exactly that, where I tuck it in there and then I use those 2 fingers instead. And it's because I haven't practiced at home much, and the times that I've actually had to nail something has been on stage, and I'm not about to put down the pick because I know I'm going to have to smash that power chord at any point. So, and since then I've seen quite a few guys do that, where they tuck it up like you showed. I've seen Brian Setzer do the same thing, and it seems to be a bit of a standard. But there is something about using the fingers sometimes. If I'm playing with somebody who's another like shredder type player, I'll counteract what they're doing by going, okay, fuck that. Away goes the pick. I'm going to play nice and slow and use my fingers. It just brings out completely different phrasing.
Yeah, totally. I got phrasing. Really kind of, I think the finger thing for me came from just being like in bed with my guitar at night and too lazy to get up and find a pick, and it'd just be like, I'll just play with my hands, you know, and I'm used to that because of the cello, you know, plucking and whatever. So, it was like, pick. I know what a pick is for, but it wasn't like, I can't play without the pick. It just kind of was like, whatever, you know.
Yep.
And you can do a lot of really cool little sort of percussive and really articulated things, you know, by sort of going like, just, grabbing it, plucking it. I even slap the guitar sometimes like a bass, you know. Yep. It's just like, my strings are, you know, kind of bass-ish anyway, so it kind of makes sense to get that sort of percussive vibe going sometimes.
Yep. Man, you've mentioned like EL84 amps quite a bit there. Do you have a preference in power tubes, and is that something? Because
really.
they have different characters, don't they? Like 6L6 versus EL34.
I do. Yeah, lately I've been my tech. Who's also my sound guy, and
who's in the chat room, by the way. I'll just go back and find.
The best amp guy in Australia, and that's like lip service. Yeah, Tone Revival.
Yep.
And he seems to say that I like, for the output stage, I like JJs. That's kind of what we end up with a lot of times.
Yep.
I tend to like the ones that have, again, the most headroom and just the kind of biggest and cleanest tone.
Cool.
But different flavors are fun to play with, especially with, I've got these little deluxe heads made by a friend of mine, George, up in Innisfail in Queensland, and he sent them down to me with beautiful new old stock 6v6 valves, you know.
Yeah, right.
And I realized how important those valves were when I swapped them out with just some whatever,
Yep.
I can't remember what they were, but it was like, oh God, that's what happened.
Where'd the magic go?
Party's finished now, and I had to get online, and it's a habit that I don't really want to delve into too much because they are running out, they're getting really expensive, and I've got better things to do than chase 6v6 valves down all the time.
Yeah.
But having said that, I know how important like a set of new old stock 6v6s and a deluxe can really make like a world of difference. But thankfully, this design that I use mostly on stage, which is the Vox Heritage, it's pretty. It's not so crucial about what valves you put in it. Like you just get a good set that's, been made, literally yesterday, and they'll kick some butt for you.
Well, Woz is saying that, hey guys, JJ EL84's in the Vox, EH6C A7's in a Marshall.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Now you said the HX effects you're using for pedals and stuff now.
Yeah.
Have you gone down the road of modelers? Because we're aware that tubes are like hard to come by these days. Good tubes.
True. Look, modeling for me hasn't really taken over to the point of where I know other people are just doing completely ampless gigs, I'm not sort of saying that I could probably do a gig, that I couldn't do a gig with like a plastic wedge behind me and a modeling thing, and it's like, wow, there's my sound coming out of a plastic wedge.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's just this. I think the combination of the cabinet and the speaker, and the material of that speaker, and just all of those things, it would. Yeah, I'm not ruling it out because I think, like everything, where I am with my rig at the moment is years and years of R&D. So to just flip it to a modeling thing, it's probably unrealistic to think I'm just going to get to where I'm happy, like just like that. It would be probably a case of trialing a bunch of stuff, working on it, doing the R&D that I did with this, because it's a radical world. It's like the two worlds are very different. So, to cross into the other world, it would take a lot of tweaking and stuff to get to where I was really happy. But I can see the potential. I mean, look, for me to plug into, say, something like the Apollo that I've got in my studio, I've got a bunch of, I've got a whole fully blown studio, one end with, mic pre's and blah, 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 and everything. And then at the other end, I've got a laptop and just an Apollo, and just for doing quick things, like to plug straight in and pull up a Friedman Buxom Betty, which is the one I seem to use the most. And it's like, the guitar's pretty fooled, to a large degree. It's pretty fooled, I would say. It thinks it's going into an amp. I think it is. It's like, yeah, this sounds cool. I can play. I'm not going, this is horrible, but I have to get the job done. That's the, the key factor is like, just, am I enjoying this? Does this sound musical? Does it inspire me? And I can get that inspiration with just one cable going into a laptop with this interface, of course. But I'm not sure, I'm there on stage, with a kind of a modeling thing. Not sure,
Yeah.
I want to look into it more, as in I don't want to rule it out because as a guitar player, like with everything in music and technology, I've embraced whatever it is when technology has come my way, whether it's guitar orientated or recording or keyboards or bass or whatever, drums, blah, 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 blah. So if there's technology to do with guitar, I've never been that person to just go, that's, I'm not going there because this is where I am, and I'm staying there. I want to know what it is. But a few times I have plugged in, it's been a little dry. It's a little bit like, to me, it's just, I think the difference for me, it's like, it's going into like a flat piece of paper where you can still see the image, but then plugging it into an amp is like a diorama. It's like got depth of field that you stick your head in it and you go,
dude,
whoa.
That's exactly the analogy. That's the analogy I use. Yeah. I've had all the modelers. Yeah. I haven't had the Axe FX 3, but I've had previous Axe FXs, Kempers, Helix. And I always say to people, in the context of the mix, if you're playing it on its own, it's great. Put it into a mix and it doesn't pop out 3D. You've turned it up to where it should be in the mix and you can hear the sound, but you can't hear the notes. If you turn it up to the point where you can hear the notes, then it's taking over from everything else. But Erwin Thomas was on a few weeks back and he was saying that since getting the Axe FX 3, that's changed his mind, and that he was going to put together this big wet rig for their reunion runs with Southern Sons. And then he said he tried the Axe FX 3 and he's like, whoa, we'll just go with that. So I haven't tried that, but it's something I want to get my hands on and just see whether it's there yet,
It's probably a good thing to just let it go for a while and then hop on a few years, because the complexity of the sound and again, like, it's the harmonic content and all of that. That's what we want, even if it's a clean sound or dirty sound. It still has to have that harmonic content and and then kind of trying to get that to sort of kind of bloom and just feel like an amp feels on stage is that's the trick. And I'm pretty sure we're going to get there very, very soon. It's probably not going to be that much longer. Things like the new valve that's come out, that the valve that's not really a valve. It's kind of like it's like a fake sort of valve, but it still operates like a valve.
Yeah.
The Vox had brought into those tiny little amps. It's Korg technology that has a sponginess of a valve and reacts like the way when you hit hard or hit softer or whatever, it sort of pumps like a valve.
Yeah, right.
Things like that made me shake my head and go, wow, we're coming a long way. This isn't just like, we've definitely gone past the Rockman,
Yeah.
Or some of the early, like I think do I see an ADA behind you?
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
ADA and the JMP1. Yeah.
I was talking about, well, I had the very first version of that Marshall preamp, as in the very first one to come off the assembly line from the Marshall factory. Yeah. And it sounded like two mosquitoes having sex. It was fucking awful. Favored by organ players after that. That's about it, because they put the fake Leslie through it, like a Leslie pedal through that, and then somehow the breakup would sound like a Leslie, that kind of sort of breakup, Man,
I thought these things were the fucking duck's nuts back in the day. And you mentioned the Bucks and Betty. I had a Friedman small box and used that for quite a while. And then I went and plugged this back in again and went, oh, that's not what I remembered a good guitar sound. Scratchy. It's a scratchy kind of sound.
Look,
not organic.
It's really hard to build on, something like that. I found, it's like, there's something about, it sounds like a real purist here, but when you plug into a 66 Blackface Twin, no matter what style of music you play, if you don't plug into that amp, turn it up to about 5 or 6 and just, bass on about 2, mids on middle, treble on about 5. If you plug in let's just say, a Les Paul into that amp and get excited, then you're probably not in the right business or something, like if that doesn't do it for you, then you're in trouble.
Absolutely.
That was one of the later things for me to discover, was that exactly. And it was through a friend brought one into the studio, and I was like, oh yeah, Blackface Twin. As soon as I plugged into it, I was like, fuck. This is like all the records like that I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And like, there it is. That's that. Okay, now I get it. I was like, okay, there's Marshall, there's Vox, but Blackface Twin. That's a sound. Like, and it just makes you want to play. You want to play. Well, for me, I just want to play every Keith Richards like riff ever.
Yeah.
So I mean, I love that sound so much that I actually had this guy in Memphis make me a preamp based on that, and that went in the P Cornish rack. It was just a Blackface Twin front of a Blackface Twin, and that was Unfortunately, I couldn't use it on the second incarnation because I needed a preamp that had MIDI specs. So I went to a Mesa Boogie, which was pretty good. One of the better pieces of Mesa Boogie gear I've come across, and a really good MIDI specs. But yeah, there's been some absolute travesties when it's come to guitar gear over the years. It's just like stuff that you go like, but everything has its thing. I'm not a snob when it comes to like even that first Marshall preamp. If I had it now, I'd probably find a use for it. Be like, it does one thing really good. I'll use it for that. Well, yeah, when you want the sound of mosquitoes having sex, it's like that's the thing that's going to give it to you.
I'm going to shoot a video very soon comparing those two units, and then I'll probably get a modern amp, a good sounding amp, just to compare it to and see how our tastes have changed. But man, I had a 52 telly, a genuine 52 telly, and a 52 deluxe amp sitting behind me here about a year or two ago. And I brought Louis Shelton, the legendary studio guy, Wrecking Crew, etc. I don't know if you know Louis, but he's a good friend of mine, just lives around the corner. And he had told me that his first guitar was a 52 telly. So I brought him around, surprised him by pulling out a real 52 and plonking it in his lap.
Wow.
And I sat there and we talked about it. It's actually episode 1 of Chit Chats with Git Cats, and it was filmed here. And to sit there and listen to him play that 52 telly through a 52 deluxe, the sound, oh my God, like, yeah, there's just a certain magic in some of those amps.
Well, that's it's a bit like Errol-Diet, part A, part B, sticking together without each other. It's almost the alchemy of that, guitar and amp together is, that's alchemy. They're made for each other, I think that whole period of Fender amps and those Fender guitars, you can try any combination and it's going to be beautiful every time.
Yeah.
The electronics, the caps they were using and everything. Well,
that guitar, man,
married.
It was the first thing that strikes you about it when you picked it up was how light it is. People talk about heavy Les Pauls and stuff, and this thing was just super light, and then you'd strum it and just super resonant.
I always think that the guitar sounds like an acoustic, like an electric that you strum and it sounds acoustic-ish, then you can like go, oh, the pickups aren't good and blah, 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 blah. It's like, you know what, you're winning the battle straight away.
Absolutely.
You're going to be okay. Yeah. If it feels dead and doesn't, before you plug it in, you're probably not going to get better when you plug it in. It's
Yep.
It has to just like have a voice without the pickups,
Yep. Yeah, there's a guitar behind me there, something that I put together out of Warmoth parts, and it sounds dead acoustically. Through the pickups, it just doesn't work. I'm going to pull it apart and try and use the neck on something else. But
those things like that, it's usually if you just swapped out, it's like, oh, you put another neck on, you go, oh, actually, this is pretty damn good now. It's like, but that neck might be better on another body too. You can't blame the neck. It might just be the mismatch.
Yeah. Steve Vai claims that his number one, if you tap the neck and then tap the body, that it's the same note. And he says that's where the synergy that's why he uses that one guitar, which he says is going to fall apart any minute now. It's got a big crack running through it. He's been saying that for the last 10, 15 years. But he said, man, it's just the same note.
Yeah, I've come across that only once with one of the guitars that I had when it was being built, and that was this little black penguin that Piers Crocker made me. And I remember him tapping the body, and it was like boom, boom. It was an E, and then he tapped the fretboard before he put it on the actual neck with a piece of ebony, and it was a B. So he had like a fifth.
Yeah.
And he's like, listen, man, there's no guarantees. And my jaw was down here. I was like, dude, I had no idea. Is this what they do? He's like, look, in factories, they can't do this, obviously. But he said, I try, and I'm like, wow. I was just like, my whole brain just went, and it was like the fact that he had tuned that piece of wood to a B and the body was going boom, boom. And that was a really good guitar for me for a long time. Still is. My nephew's got it now. But that I understand that can be a bonus for a guitar. There actually are some musical notes coming out before you put it together.
Man, it's funny. I was talking to Charles Cillier, the guitar builder, recently about building me something custom. And I said to him, man, would it knock off a bit of price if we don't go with a fancy finish, because I don't like shiny, because I'm too scared to play it, or, let somebody else play it. And he said he didn't want to give me one sort of with a beat up finish, because he said that's the final piece of the puzzle for me. The finish has a sound, and it's the final piece of the puzzle on the synergy of my guitar. I'm like, wow, man, you're really looking into the pedantics of it to be worried about that.
Yeah, I'm not gonna dispel that. It's like, who knows? It's like, if that's his thing, then let him do it, I say. Yeah. Absolutely.
Mark, man, we could talk freaking hours. You did say you had places to be, man, so I'm going to let you go, mate.
Yeah, man.
Thank you so much for your time. Been great talking to you. And like I said, if you're going to be around playing any shows around here, I'll shoot you an email and try and line up to come to a sound check or something and have a bit of a rig rundown. So thanks heaps, man.
We always get up there.
Awesome. Folks, thanks for tuning in. If you're listening to this on a podcast show and you want to see our dials, come over to YouTube where you can see it all. Better experience there. You can actually ask us questions like people have been doing. Lots of thank yous coming up in the chats there. People saying it was a nice chat. Yep. So
thanks for listening, everybody.
Mark Lizotte, Diesel, thank you so much,
Cheers.
man. Been an
Cheers,
honor.
Rick. No worries.
See you guys.
Take
Bye
care.
now.
Stay safe, everyone.